Andy Warhol revolutionized art by painting the world as he saw it, in adverts, soup cans, and movie stars. Born in Pittsburgh, 1928, he trained as a commercial illustrator and moved to New York with an eye for popular imagery. In 1962, he presented 32 nearly identical canvases of Campbell's soup cans, one for each variety, hung like groceries on a shelf. This bold gesture marked Warhol's arrival as pop art's prophet of the mundane. Warhol was fascinated by the ordinary. He later quipped that his mother had served him soup every day of his childhood, giving the cans a personal nostalgia. Yet in front of the paintings he insisted, "Don't worry about what I think. What should matter is what you think about when you see them." In other words, Warhol gave us a mirror. The subject of his art was us, the consumers. Warhol came from an age in a booming post-war America where department stores, shiny appliances, and television ads offered the promise that more stuff meant a richer life. He absorbed this culture as a commercial illustrator, freelancing for Tiffany's, the New York Times, and advertising agencies. He often based his drawings on photographs and traced familiar logos, a process he never abandoned. By the late 1950s, he was already fascinated by Hollywood glamour and sensational images. But instead of painting abstract flurries or heroic oil scenes, Warhol painted soup cans, Coca-Cola bottles, newspapers, and celebrities. These were the icons of mass culture, and he co-opted them into fine art. In doing so, he blurred the line between high and low culture. What American shopper could not recognize a Campbell's label or Marilyn Monroe? By bringing these images off the supermarket shelf and onto the gallery wall, Warhol asked, why shouldn't art be everyday life? His work was layered with contradiction. On one hand, it celebrated consumer abundance. He once said that in America, a glass of Coca-Cola is the same for everyone, rich or poor, praising equality of access. He loved the idea of the most hideous things becoming art. On the other hand, Warhol's flat, deadpan style made that celebration feel ironic. A soup can was painted with perfect uniformity, but repeated 32 times. His silk screens of Marilyn repeated her face until half the portraits were fading to black. In the Death and Disaster series, he printed gruesome images of car crashes or electric chairs over and over. The relentless seriality felt clinical, a machine endlessly copying an image. In Warhol's world, the same machine that churned out products was now churning out art. In Warhol's art, repetition is the point. Each canvas looks almost like its neighbor, forcing us to confront the homogeny of mass production. When Warhol first showed the Campbell's soup cans at the Ferris Gallery in Los Angeles, he arranged them in neat rows, 4 high, 8 across. Viewers initially saw a tight unit of seemingly identical images that the eye takes in at once, like wallpaper. On closer look, subtle differences emerge. One can's red is a bit brighter, another's fleur-de-lis slightly askew. These tiny imperfections hint at the human hand behind the mechanical motif. Warhol himself had explained his logic plainly. Irving Blum, the gallerist, asked why 32, and Warhol answered simply, there are 32 varieties. He was aligning his art with the logic of Campbell's marketing. In Warhol's estimation, the role of the artist was not to impose uniqueness, but to present reality. The world already made 32 soups, so he did too. This systematic repetition challenged art world traditions. Critics wondered, if one painted soup can is art, what about 32 identical cans? Warhol confronted the cult of originality head-on. He copied his own images by hand and later by silkscreen, a process drawn from printing presses. And this was no accident. He often said, "I want to be a machine," implying that the artist's ego should disappear into the work. By doing so, he asked unsettling questions. What makes something art? Must it be unique or expensive? As one commentator notes, Warhol's strategy questioned the very nature of art, mirrored the mass production of consumer culture. If art can be mass-produced, perhaps meaning is not lost, but transformed by repetition. Warhol's Campbell's soup cans epitomize his world of business art. By presenting an ordinary commercial label as fine art, he both paid homage to and critiqued consumer culture. Each canvas in the series is a hand-painted imitation of the familiar red and white can from everyday life. In doing this, Warhol turned a mundane product into a spectacle. The arrangement of identical cans to form an exhibition meant that Warhol's audience, museum goers and passerbys alike, had to ask, is this art? Or is this just stuff from the grocery store? Culturally, the soup cans struck a nerve. In 1962, Americans enjoyed unprecedented prosperity. Supermarkets brimmed with choices, and marketing promised that variety was the American dream. Warhol's soup paintings brought this reality into the gallery. As one historian puts it, they provided commentary on how people have come to perceive these things in modern times, as commodities to be bought and sold, identifiable as such with one glance. By hanging the cans like goods on a shelf, Warhol implied that art itself had been commodified. Indeed, he knew exactly what he was doing. The episode foreshadowed Warhol's own trajectory, from unknown illustrator to celebrity artist whose paintings became high-priced commodities. At recent exhibitions at MoMA, the soup cans have been displayed singly in a long line, as if on a supermarket shelf. The installation underscores their message. Visitors are invited to walk along the line, pausing at each can's label. Only then do the slight differences, a touch of orange in the red paint, a missing gold brand, a titled fleur-de-lis, become visible. The effect is uncanny. What looked identical from afar gains uniqueness upon reflection. Warhol thus reveals a paradox. The act of mass-producing things can actually highlight their individuality, if one is willing to look closely. Yet, on the surface, the soup cans remain the same, a reminder of how consumer products and even celebrities are packaged and marketed as uniform brands. Warhol's soup cans were only the beginning. He applied the same formula to people. In 1962, he unveiled a series of Marilyn Monroe portraits shortly after her death, repeating her face in garish colors, half of them fading to black. Later, he printed dozens of Elvis Presley's, Liz Taylor's, and even a grid of Coca-Cola bottles. The replication of a movie star's face or a soda bottle carried a message. In the age of mass media, the famous are as ubiquitous as logos, and fame can be consumed just like cereal. Warhol understood that television, magazines, and paparazzi treated people like products. He famously noted that the media's obsession with celebrities equated a person to a commodity. Marilyn, in a way, became another Coke bottle to buy. By silkscreening the same image of Monroe ad infinitum, Warhol showed how both images and individuals are packaged, advertised, and eventually exhausted by repetition. At the same time, Warhol's dispassionate style teased out the darker side of spectacle. His Death and Disaster series took that same commercial approach to tragedy. Decaying car crash victims, electric chairs, and suicides all repeated in grids. The effect is numbing, precisely Warhol's point. As one critic observed, endless repetition in these works desensitizes the viewer, mirroring how news media flattens horror into headlines. Even life and death had become fodder for the culture machine. Warhol refused to moralize overtly. Instead, he held up the images and let viewers squirm under the gaze of the copy machine. Warhol's fascination with identity was twofold. On the one hand, his art shows how personal identity in mass culture is often washed away in the flood of products. Every soup can is identical, except for its tiny flavor text. Every celebrity portrait is a stock photo repeated. By manufacturing sameness, he hinted at how consumerism tends to create generic identities. Some critics argue that in Warhol's supermarket, everyone is the same product. On the other hand, Warhol's own identity was strongly asserted, if subtly. He painted dozens of self-portraits, often wearing a silver wig and sunglasses, an iconography he carefully cultivated. In the end, Warhol's message is elusive, and that was partly the point. He famously downplayed hidden meanings. As he once told a friend, the viewer's reaction matters more than his intent. His paintings of everyday goods, celebs, and disasters present the surface of life in an industrial society without overt commentary. Some see this as critique. Warhol forces us to face the banality and brutality that surround us. Others see celebration. He embraced the glitter and gumption of consumer culture as openly as anyone. Warhol himself put it aptly, art is anything you can get away with. In practice, that meant he would turn a Campbell soup can into art if he could. And he did. Perhaps Warhol wanted to say that everything is art and nothing is sacred in capitalism. By repeating an image, he showed how meaning could shift. What once was ordinary becomes mysterious when isolated in a gallery. By remaining personally aloof, he let the images speak for themselves. The art student who beholds Warhol's work might think, is this serious or a joke? Warhol's genius was that perhaps it is both at once. What he wants to say, if anything at all, might simply be, look again. His art is an invitation to meditate on the mundane, to see poetry in the packaged.